All right, man, let's dive into Warriors Kings. So, to get the obvious stuff out of the way, Sacramento, the best offense of the regular season. The Warriors, we all know their home road situation. The defense was much worse on the road. Wiggins was out for a lot of the tail end of the season with a personal matter, but they've got their team. GP2 is playing, and as we know, the Warriors, now that Wiggins is back, the starting five, when everybody's there, the net rating on it was super positive and all that. But still, it's going to be a hell of a challenge trying to guard this Kings team. So, when I dove into some of the regular season matchups between them, well, at least the games where both teams were playing their actual guys, the first noticeable thing was that for one of those games, the Warriors had Draymond guarding De'Aaron Fox for pretty much the entire game. In another game they played just a couple of days earlier, they had Draymond guarding like Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter or Keegan Murray, just kind of whatever the flow of the game dictated, and they would have like Wiggins on De'Aaron Fox. So the first question is, what are the Warriors going to do with Draymond? Should be said that Looney, whenever he was in the game, he's pretty much always guarding Sabonis. And when Draymond was at center, he would guard Sabonis as far as when Draymond and Looney are on the court together. And so you think about a Fox-Sabonis pick and roll where Draymond is already on De'Aaron Fox. The switch that leads to Draymond guarding Sabonis, that makes sense. As far as Looney guarding Fox, I mean, we've seen before, like, the Warriors have had Looney switch onto guards, and no, they don't expect him to lock up guards, but they do trust him to sort of shade a guard towards the help defense, as opposed to just getting burned in a one-on-one. There's always the possibility of having Looney drop on De'Aaron Fox screens, but Fox has been so good from the mid-range free throw line area this season that I feel like he could make enough to where the Warriors are like, you know what, maybe this isn't the move. So we'll see. Maybe Draymond will start on Fox like one of their games. Maybe Wiggins will start on Fox like another one of their games. But that'll also depend on where Wiggins is at with his conditioning and all that. Of course, when GP2 is in the game, I think it's safe to assume that he's going to be on Fox. So that's one question I've got. But look, De'Aaron Fox is really good. And so no matter who's in front of him, he's going to be able to get to some of his ISOs and just his free throw line jumpers that I've talked about all season that have dropped for him. But also we'll see, like, he could just try to mismatch hunt, try to go at especially Jordan Poole if he's in the game, try to ISO him. Steph is, of course, a good team defender, typically does his job well, but he's still not the biggest dude. But at the same time, like, we've seen Steph just get really good at hedging and trying to like freeze a guy for a second and get back to his guy when teams try to go at him in one-on-ones. We could see if the Warriors would try that if De'Aaron Fox is trying to just go into hunting mode. As for Clay, I do wonder how he will fare guarding De'Aaron in one-on-ones, because I imagine we're going to see that a bit. At least within the flow of the Warriors switching defense, like, my guess is that Clay is not going to have possessions where he's starting on De'Aaron Fox, but I could be wrong there. They could try doubling or trapping Fox, but that's going to be tough, man, because you're potentially giving up something in the middle of the floor for Sabonis, or it's an opening for just all of these Kings shooters between Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, who's just one of the best shooting rookies ever, one of the best shooters in the league, period, Huerter, Malik Monk, of course. And it's like, yeah, in the past, I think the Warriors have done a great job at like doubling and then zoning up around it if they need to, but this Warriors season, with the inconsistencies they've had on defense, especially on the road where they've just been straight up bad defensively sometimes, it's like, can I trust that? I don't know, man. And it's not just catch and shoots with a lot of these guys on the Kings. Like, these guys can also put it on the floor and then, make the next play. The other thing is all the Kings handoff actions, which typically is Sabonis looking around and saying, okay, all the same names: Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, Davion Mitchell when he's in there. Of course, Fox as well. Let's try to make something happen. And I think the way the Warriors are going to guard that. So I do wonder just how aggressively the Warriors would want their bigs to be playing up on those types of things. Like, if Kevin Huerter is coming around a handoff action, he's got Clay trailing him, will the Warriors ask Draymond or Looney, depending on who's guarding Sabonis, to be super high up on those actions with the fear of giving up a roll to Sabonis? Or would they be more like, no, let's see if our guards and our wings can do enough to get around those screens and bother just those handoffs to where we can have Draymond and Looney still kind of not dropping, but certainly not playing high enough to where Sabonis has free reign at the basket, you know what I mean? We'll see. I mean, that's going to be on Clay and Steph and Kuminga and DiVincenzo and Poole to just fight around him. And also another question is like, will Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk and Barnes and all these guys, will they be able to generate enough stuff at the rim? Like, I know that they're all good shooters. They're going to take those shots when they've got them. But getting just a few more buckets per game on drives from those sort of actions, that can be good. Whether that can lead to you getting something or like Sabonis, who's now rolling. And of course, speaking of Sabonis, I mean, among all of the beautiful handoff actions and the screen setting and all that, there's going to be moments where he's just in the post against Draymond and Looney. And it's going to be physical, and there's going to be fouls probably both ways at various times, and there's going to be offensive rebounds and tip-ins, and what does it all look like? Like, who ends up winning those situations? For what it's worth, I think the Warriors will try to dare Sabonis into taking, 16-footers, with which Sabonis will then take that space and then, get the back-to-the-basket game going. I guess there's a question of how much will the Warriors double when Sabonis is in the post. I don't know. That's a dangerous game, doubling against this Kings team. Anyway, on the other side of this thing, so the Kings guarding the Warriors. In the games that I saw, one of the games, Sabonis was basically at the level of the screen on Steph when Steph was running anything involving Sabonis. And in the other game, the Kings were just basically trapping Steph with Sabonis. And some of this will depend on just how many simple pick and rolls the Warriors want to run with Steph, but there are going to be some times where it's like Looney or Draymond just in the middle of the floor, and then from there it becomes a 4-on-3, and then it's, if you're the Kings, can you close up the middle of the floor while also closing out to shooters and at the same time not leaving Steph or Clay, because of course they feast on those opportunities when the defense is scrambling. All of that applies to Jordan Poole as well. Look, as far as the three-point shooting with Poole, this season has just been pretty up and down. I will say at the tail end of the season he was mostly trending upwards with the consistency and all that, but the three ball just comes and goes with the guy. Like, one game he can make 6 or 7 threes, next game he'll go 1 for 10, The biggest thing with Poole to me is just not forgetting to attack off the catch. He can draw fouls. As far as matchups, look, I assume Sabonis will be guarding Looney when Looney is in the game, which means a wing is going to be on Draymond, which means you could try switching some of the Steph-Draymond actions to where you don't have to get as crazy with trapping and all that. I remember seeing possessions in the regular season stuff where Keegan Murray was on Draymond and stuff. Now, as far as when Draymond is at center, you could try Sabonis, which will put him in those Steph actions, of course, but also you could try putting Sabonis on not Draymond, which is something they did in one of their fourth quarters that I watched in this regular season, where they had Sabonis on Wiggins. But look, man, with the Steph-Draymond two-man game between whether it's Sabonis or a wing, or you're trapping, or you're switching, or you're doing whatever the hell you're doing, nothing is going to completely work between their handoff actions and the fakes and, Steph acting like he's going to go into the screen, then come back the other way, and then he's catching that into a three, and also Steph will just shoot it with 3 dudes on him sometimes, There's also the fact that when they're running that action, that means Draymond's at the top of the key, which means there is probably a cut open somewhere else. It's going to be very tough. As for who guards Steph, I imagine you don't want De'Aaron to have to do all of that, chasing around Steph and then everything on offense for you. Granted, I also imagine the Kings will be switching a lot of the Warriors' typical off-ball actions. I am guessing that if Davion and Steph's minutes line up at all, then Davion will get Steph. And then besides all that, I feel like we're just having the same conversation about guarding the Warriors that we have a lot of the time, which is when you are switching a lot of those off-ball actions, are you then not getting beat on your guy cutting right after you switch? Because after you switch, sometimes there's a little window there. So that could be Clay getting a cut, or Wiggins or Poole or whoever. Because the Warriors, they're going to make some crazy threes. It's just how it goes. The hope is that, number one, they don't completely torch you with those. Clay hitting his tough ones, especially in transition, Steph, Poole, the whole thing. But also, do you not get beat on Kuminga, who's going to cut to the basket, and Clay, who's going to try for his couple catch and drives that will then lead into a turnaround jumper around the free throw line or whatever. And look, man, there's a decent chance a whole lot of these games just become a shootout. We all know the Kings defense finished 20-something in the league. The Warriors defense was not that much higher. Now, within all that, there's the whole, the Warriors defense was much better at home than on the road, and on the road they gave up way more threes and all that stuff. They also did not have GP2 for most of the season. A funny thing that kind of went under the radar, the Kings' defense was much better on the road than at home. So take that for what you will. Of course, the Kings have 4 home games, and relying on the Warriors to win on the road this season has just been not the move, pretty much. And even with that said, a part of me would just like to believe that the defending champions and Steph, Clay, Draymond, and all that would be able to win a road playoff game in round 1. And so, with all of the respect that I can possibly throw at the Sacramento Kings, I do believe the Warriors are going to win this series. Because I would like to believe that defensively we can get at least a couple of just classic Warriors defensive playoff games where they just do everything correctly, but the communication, the closeouts, the switching, all of that, with Draymond being the heart of that whole thing and just doing whatever you need him to do defensively, guarding bigger, smaller, being a help guy. And if that's not going to happen, then you know what? Maybe Steph will just go nuclear and that'll decide the series. But the Kings can win this thing, no doubt, and I do think we're going 6 games at the least.